Why should we reference? And the simple answer to that is referencing is an acknowledgement of another person's intellectual work. Why that's really important is it firstly shows you where that information came from. The more references you have in your assessments, the more it shows us that you are critically evaluating where the information comes from, and it gives you credibility as the person writing the information. Now, when I first started getting into building biology 20 years ago, I'd get up and talk and people would say, well, where did you get that fact from? And I'd go, well, I know I read it, but I don't know where I got it from. When I started to remember my facts, and the irony is there's probably about 3 pages of facts that I keep in my head on environmental health, on electromagnetic fields, allergens, air quality, water pollution, etc., that I always remember, that I always regurgitate in every public speaking or webinar interview that I do. So it's really important to know where that information comes from so you can back it up, because when I'm speaking or when I'm writing, it's not my opinion, it's actually the World Health Organization stated that in 2010, or Panza had indicated that in 2016, or, NICNAS said this, etc. It gives you credibility as a consultant in the work that you do. And especially if you're going to be writing or public speaking, you need to know your facts. And this is why this is such an important area that you need and skill that you need to acquire when you're doing this course. Now, referencing can be frustrating the first time you do it, and I'm sure most people, including myself, when I first learnt this, I didn't have what I'm about to give you. I wish I did. It would have saved me many hours, days, months of trying to get my head around referencing, because it's actually quite simple. In the research workshop, I've shown you where you can get the information from, up-to-date information on anything you want through PubMed and other search engine databases. Here I'm going to show you how to actually reference it correctly in the body of your work and how to write a reference list. So let's go about this. As part of this course, you will have access to the essay, report and referencing guide. Please have this with you as I go through this with you right now in order to show you how easy it is to reference. You will find this document when you log in through your username and password and log into the subject. On the right-hand side is the student handbook, your referencing guide, an essay guide, and research video on how to conduct research. There are 2 types of referencing systems, the footnote or the numbering system, and the Harvard or name and date system. The one most people are familiar with is the footnote or numbering system, and simply put, that means at the end of a sentence that contains a fact that you got from another source, you simply put a number. That number is then put at the bottom of that page with all of the details about where that reference came from. So if you have a look at this example, you'll see that I've written a paragraph and then used 3 references using the footnote numbering system. The number of chemicals in the world is essentially unknown. The world's largest database, the Chemical Abstract Service Registry, established in 1907, currently contains more than 100 million chemicals. And then after that, there's the number 1, where that reference came from. If you look at number 1 here, at the bottom of the page, it says the CAS, it came from the Chemical Abstract Service in 2015, and it provides all the information, including the URL. What's a URL? Well, basically, that's the website address. So in the body of the essay or assignment, you have the number, and at the bottom, you have where that information came from. This is not the type of referencing system that you will be using at the college. The one that you will be using is the Harvard referencing system. And the reason why the Harvard referencing system is more important, I've just highlighted there the footnotes. The reason why the Harvard system is more important is because it states where that information came from. Now, as I mentioned just before, especially as a building biologist, you need to start remembering facts, where it came from, an authority source, and the year that it was published. So this is a more useful system because it tells us instantly who it is without having to rummage through the reference list or the footnotes at the bottom to see, well, where did that information come from? So with the Harvard system, simply put, it's the name and date system. You can see here in the first one that that same sentence that I just read, instead of having a number, it has the author, which is the chemical abstract surface, followed by the year of publication, which is the year at the bottom of the website when it was last updated. You can see in the next one that we have Obadovsky, who stated that around 200,000 new chemicals are added to this database every week. Now, I didn't get that out of my head. I got that from Obadovsky. I'm probably not saying his name right. And the year that I got that information from, the publication date from that book, was 2015. While many of these chemicals are produced by natural processes, inadvertently produced as byproducts of the fuel combustion or other industrial processes, according to Rosenthal 2000, so that's the next one, the number of chemicals commercially produced has increased potentially in parallel with increasing industrialisation. So in this one very long sentence, there are 3 references to show you where each of the important information came from. And this is what I need you to do in your assessments. Any information that you obtain from a website, a book, a journal, a newspaper, a video, a TV program, anything that didn't come from your own life experience needs to be referenced. And it's not okay to plonk the reference at the bottom of a paragraph and assume all that information above came from that one source. It doesn't work like that. With the Harvard system, at the back of the essay, not the bottom of the page, you're going to have what's called a reference list. And the reference list will be listed in alphabetical order, all of the references that you used in the body of your assessment, your essay or report. So you can see we used Kaz, Obadovsky, and we used Rosenthal. So at the reference list at the back of your report, an assessment or essay, you're going to have in alphabetical order the list of those references. Now, if you use these references many times throughout your essay, you still only write it once in the reference list at the back of the essay. So let's go through how to reference. Where does the reference go? Well, there's 2 places where the reference needs to go in the body of your assessment. Firstly, it needs to go within the text where the information was, like I just showed you. It's in the body of the written work, normally at the beginning or at the end of the sentence, although in the previous slide I showed you it could even go in the middle of the sentence, depending on where the facts are. The second area where the reference has to go is in the reference list at the back of the assessment. And the reference list is in alphabetical order, as I just mentioned, of all the references, including the website address if you got it from a website. So let's have a look how to reference in the body of the essay or the report or assessment. The first way we can reference is by citing author as prominent. It gives the author prominence by using their surname as part of the sentence along with the date and the year in brackets. For example, Smith, brackets 1989, has argued that the side effects of asbestos were well established well before it was banned from the Australian market. So this is where the author is prominent because he's or she's at the beginning of the sentence. Smith, and then the year of publication is always in brackets. Another way to cite or reference is to have information prominent, and this is the way I do most of my research, is I look at a fact and then I put where I got that information from at the end of the sentence. So with information prominent, the prominence is given to the information rather than who cited it. For example, it has been argued that the side effects of asbestos were well established before it was banned from the Australian market. And when you do it this way, the author's surname and the year goes in their brackets. And it's that simple. That's the Harvard system because it's called the name, the surname of the author, or if it's not a person, if it's an organisation, it would be the Asthma Foundation, 1989. Or the Chemical Abstract Service, which is an organisation, 1989. So it could be the organisation's name or the author's surname and the year. Name and year. That's it. That's all you include in the body of your work. Nothing more. No website addresses, nothing. Just the name and the date. So let's have a look. If we have one author for that particular work who wrote that scientific article or that website, for example, whenever you quote an author, you must acknowledge the author's surname and the year the information was published. For websites, you'll find the year will be when it was last updated, and it's normally on the home page at the bottom. Do not insert a comma between the name and the date. For example, according to Kapchuk, 1999, and you notice in the first example, the author is prominent. According to Kapchuk, his surname is there, but the year is enclosed in brackets. Chinese medicine began around 5,000 years ago. The other way, where the information is prominent, exactly the same sentence, referenced differently. Chinese medicine began 5,000 years ago. And where did I get the information from? Well, from Kapchuk in 1999. In this case, the brackets encloses the author's surname and the year. If there are two authors who wrote that article or that web page, then you have to do the following. You include the surname of each of the authors. So in the first example, some health authorities have already withdrawn funding for these kinds of treatments. And then in brackets, Hardy and Taylor, 1999. So you have an ampersand, or the and sign, between the two surnames of the author, followed by the year that was published. Another example is, it is important that undergraduate nurses master the skill of critiquing studies in preparation for professional practices as registered nurses. In brackets, Daly and Chang, the year 2000. So with two authors, you just include both of their surnames, put an ampersand between it, and then the year of publication. If you're incorporating the author's names into the sentence, replace the ampersand with the word and. So for example, if the author is prominent, such as in this example, Iqbal and Reeve, then the brackets of the year, 1997, emphasise the difficulty in ventilation systems. So if the author's prominent and there's two authors, you just put an and between them, and then of course the year has to be in brackets. If there are three or more authors, then only the first author's surname is included, followed by the words et al. That's E-T-A-L. That means there are more than three. All names must appear in the reference list. So for example, one survey set out to establish mental health nurses' knowledge of legislation. Brackets, Jones et al., 1999. Another example would be, according to Smith, where the author is prominent, according to Smith et al., and then in brackets is the year. So if the author is prominent, the surname is not in brackets, only the year is. But if the information is prominent and the reference is at the end of the sentence, you include the author's surname and the year in the brackets. Another example, according to Smith et al., 2001, indoor air pollution is a significant contributing factor to asthma. If there is no author, then I'd strongly suggest you don't use that reference. Why? Because it gives you no credibility to say, well, who said that? So I'll give you an example of this, but I would strongly suggest you don't have this unless it's a reputable information from a scientific database or something like that. But rarely is this going to occur in your case. So if there is no author, use the title in italics with the brackets along with the date. For example, one patient education leaflet states that the disease occurs more frequently in men. Brackets, coronary heart disease facts, 1998. So that was a pamphlet, for example. Another example would be the upper limit of the acceptable lifting zone is defined as the action limit. Brackets, designing physically demanding machines, 1992. As I mentioned, I strongly suggest you don't use references that have no author. If there's more than one reference to the same author in the same year, so that author has written two articles on the same topic that you want to reference, then you need to put in an alphabetic system. For example, in 1926, the first Industrial Workers Act was developed. Brackets, Smith, 1984, and then the little letter A. Second example, several horses were killed during the Boer War in 1880. Bracket Smith, 1984b. So in these examples, Smith has written 2 different articles in the same year, and we need to differentiate when we get to the reference list what those articles were so we can actually access that information. In order to do that, we have the letters A, B, and it goes right to Z. If you are referencing electronic sources, and let's face it, most of the information you get nowadays will be from electronic sources, particularly from PubMed and other scientific databases or Google Scholar. So they include the internet, but they can also include things like emails, CD-ROMs, DVDs, etc. For electronic sources, you cite the author's surname, and the year. And the year will generally be when it was last updated, which is normally on the home page, at the bottom of the home page of the website. Do not, whatever you do, ever put a website address, or what we refer to as a URL, in the body of the assignment, because we'll cross it out and we'll get you to resubmit the assignment and do the referencing properly. With newspapers, when referencing a newspaper without an author, give full bibliographical details within the text and in the reference list. So give the name of the newspaper as the title. For example, according to a recent report, the government's considering ways to attract more nurses to rural areas. And in brackets, advertiser, which was the name of the newspaper, followed by the exact date of the publication of that article, 27th of May 2016, and the page number. So that's how you would reference a newspaper. Another example is a report in The Australian where the author is first, The Australian as in the newspaper, and then brackets the actual date that it was published, 1st of September 1996, and the page number. A report in The Australian revealed the economic situation, blah, blah, blah. If it's an Act of Parliament, and this is something that building biologists may need to do from time to time, what you do is you publish the Act, the title and the year section of the Act. Acts of Parliament should be detailed in full in the text of your essay, and unlike any other reference, you do not actually need to put this into the reference list at the back of your report. For example, according to the Nurses Act 1999, which was in South Australia, SA, and then Section 3, Number 1, Paragraph 1, unprofessional conduct includes incompetence or negligence in relation to nursing. So with Acts of Parliament, you don't actually need to put that information in the reference list, because all of this will tell us immediately where we can find the information. When you're doing direct quotes, now I don't very rarely do direct quotes, which means copying exactly word for word an entire sentence that someone else has stated. So direct quotes are those that have not been paraphrased, copied word for word, are those that have been paraphrased word for word from a source. Restrict quoted work to less than 10%. Not more than 10% of your entire work should be direct quotes. Otherwise, it will verge on what we refer to as plagiarism. It is essential that you use inverted commas and page numbers to identify direct quotes. For example, in quotes, in fact, long-lasting or recurrent stressful situations can be detrimental to health, end of quotes, according to Cromer and Grandjean, 1997, page 211. So you can see here when you're actually referencing a direct quote, the only difference is you're adding a page number at the end to show exactly where that quote came from, and you've got quotation marks here as well. So that's the difference between direct quotes. Let's do some more examples. When part of a quoted sentence is omitted, use 3 full stops to represent the omitted part. For example, in quotation marks, lack of direct access to data, ... meaning we've gotten rid of the next few words and then continued on the sentence, poses a number of problems, end of quotation marks, and then of course the reference will include the name, surname of the author, followed by the year, followed by the page number. Another example is, Newsom suggests that a lack of access data, quote, ... possesses a number of problems. And then of course the year, 1985, and the page number. So here the author is prominent, Newsom, surname comes first, whereas in the first example, all of the information was prominent, so the author's surname was at the end. Tips for citing references in the body of your essay. It is best to avoid websites that have no author or publisher or are not a reputable source. How do you know if they're a reputable source? Well, you will watch the research workshop that I've provided as part of this course. Secondly, if the author is unknown, use the website title, but only use it if there's an organisation that is authoritative. Third, if there is no year, no last update or copyright date, or you can't find that on the web page, simply write n.d. as in no date. DVDs and CD-ROMs should be cited by name or publisher and their dates. When citing all email messages or conversations, you do not need to include them in the reference list. However, email addresses should never be cited, or messages should never be cited without the permission of the owner. So it's very rare that you would use information that you obtain from an email. Now I've just spoken about how to reference in the body of the text, how to put the references in, and all it came down to was the name, surname of the author, and the year, or the organisation's name and the year. The only other time we add the page numbers is if it's a direct quote. That's it in the body of the essay and the report and any of your assessments, name and date. Once you've done that, all of the references that you used and quoted within the body of your essay then need to be listed at the back of your assignment or essay or report in what's called a reference list. Now, the reference list includes all of those sources like websites, books, journals, newspapers that you used within the body of your assessment. This is different to a bibliography, which we don't use at the college and we suggest you don't use. A bibliography are all the references in the reference list and all of the items that you read or consulted while preparing your essay or report, even though they were not directly quoted within your body. So the bibliography is often much longer because of all the things you read, and you read the article and the scientific data on the article, but it wasn't relevant, but you actually read it. So in a bibliography, you'd still include it. We don't want bibliographies in any of the assessments that you submit at the college. Tips to writing a reference list. The reference list goes at the back of the report or assessment. Firstly, never number the entries. They're always written in alphabetical order, regardless of when they appeared in the body of your work. Thirdly, if there is no author, list by the title of the article. Place single entries before multiple author entries when both begin with the same name. If a reference goes on for more than one line, indent all the subsequent lines except the first one. So it makes it easier for us to see in alphabetical order the author's names. If you have several works by the same author, list these works in chronological publication date order, i.e. start with the earliest publication first, followed by the latest down as you go down the reference list. If one author has published several works in the same year, list these works according to the lowercase letter attached to the date. And we mentioned that with the previous example of Smith, 1997 A, Smith, 1997 B, etc. In the Harvard system, all the elements of the reference after the date are separated from each other by commas. A full stop concludes the end of the citation. So let me show you an example of this. If you're referencing in the reference list at the back of the report, if you're referencing a journal, this is exactly the information that you need to make sure is included. You need the surname followed by a comma, the initial followed by a full stop, the year of publication followed by a comma, and then title of article in quotation marks, or it could be italicized, followed by the journal name that's actually italicized, volume number, issue number, semicolon, and then page numbers. Sounds complicated, it's not. Just follow this, and here are two examples. Balsma N, Cohen M, 2016, and the title of the article was Environmental Chemical Assessment in Clinical Practice, Unveiling the Elephant in the Room, followed by the end of the quotation marks, and then the journal title is always italicized. IJERPH is the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. You always abbreviate the journal, followed by the volume, then the issue number. The volume is number 13, the issue number is 2, and notice that there's no gaps between them, followed by the semicolon, and the last bit of the information is the page number. Because most journals aren't publishing or printing their journals now, you'll often find that this used to be the page numbers, now it's just the reference for the article number, because most journals are now online. Another example is here, Thomas, comma, G dot, year, followed by a comma, the title of the article, the impact of alcohol on the family, which is quoted, and then the journal itself is always either abbreviated or written out and italicised, followed by a comma. Then you have the number, which is number 28, the issue number, which is always in brackets, followed by the page numbers, which in this case was provided, pages 22 to 29. So this is how you write a reference list for a journal at the back of your assessment. For a newspaper, this is how you write the reference list for a newspaper. It's the surname followed by a comma, the initial followed by a dot, a year, title of article in quotation marks, the newspaper name is italicised, followed by the day, month that it was printed, and the page numbers. For example, Lawnham, P, 2000, program aims to attract nurses to aged care. The name of the newspaper is italicised, followed by the exact date that it was printed and the page. Another example, Windsor, K, 1984, Education, Employment, the Paradox of Learning for Job Security, quoted. The Age newspaper is actually in italics, followed by the exact date that it was printed and published and the page. Websites. This is important because most of you are going to obtain your information from websites. So it's the author. You can see always at the top here, I've given you exactly how it needs to appear, where the commas go, where the full stops go, where the brackets goes, and you need to follow this to the dot. Author, year, web page title is italicised. Then the medium, whether it's online, whether it's a DVD, whether it's a CD, needs to be in brackets. Available, semicolon, and then the web page address. This is where the web page address goes. The web page address, of course, is another word for the URL. Then, after that, it's the date you access this information. That needs to be included. So here's an example. Chem Supply, which is the organisation, 2017, comma, safety data sheet for sodium lauryl sulfate is italicised because that is the web page title. So the web page heading for that article was safety data sheet for sodium lauryl sulfate, followed by a full stop. The online is in brackets, means we obtained that information not on a CD or a DVD, it was actually online that we got it, followed by a full stop and available, semicolon, and then the web page address. You literally cut and paste the website address of the page you got the information from. Not the home page, but the page you got that information from, followed by the exact date that you accessed the information. So we know this was printed in 2017, and we know I accessed in 2010, which of course doesn't make sense. It should be at least 2017 because it has to be always after that date. Another example is Florence Nightingale Museum Trust 1999, and then the title of the web page was Florence Nightingale Museum website, followed by online, so we got it not from a DVD or CD, we got it online, followed by available, the URL, website address, and then the year that we accessed that information. The exact date we accessed the information needs to go on there. If the website has no author, then you just include the web page title, followed by online, date, website address, and the date you accessed it. For example, nursing theory page, comma, online, the date last updated the website and where it was available, the URL, and then the date you actually accessed the information. All of this is in your reference guide, which is provided when you log on. You'll see it on the right-hand side. Reference list for books. When it comes to a book, you always write the reference list in the following way. The surname followed by a comma, the initial followed by a dot, a year, comma, and then the title of the book is italicised. Then the edition. If it's not the first edition, then you need to stipulate second edition, third edition, fourth edition. If it's the first edition, then obviously you don't write it in. Followed by the publisher and the place of publication. For example, Gerber, comma, R, that's the author. So surname first, followed by his initial. If there's two initials or a middle name, you just put them together. Gerber, R.D., for example. Followed by the year of publication. Then vibrational medicine was the title of the book, followed by a comma. The publisher was Bear and Company, and it was published in New Mexico. Another example is Miller, A.W., and Hanretter, K.P., 1997. Obstetrics Illustrated was the title of the book, followed by 5th edition, and then it was published, the publisher was Churchill Livingston, and it was published in New York. So that's what a reference list at the back of your essay will look like if you were referencing a book. If a book is sponsored by an organisation and the title page bears no author, list the book under the name of the organisation. For example, Springhouse Corporation 1997, and the title of the book was Fluids and Electrolytes Made Incredibly Easy. And then, of course, Springhouse Corporation again, because it's the publisher, followed by where it was published in Pennsylvania. When you're referencing manuals, such as the manuals that we provide as part of the course, this is how they need to be written in the reference list. The surname, followed by the initial, the year, the title of the manual, then the edition, if it wasn't a first edition, the publisher and the place of publication. So with the college, it'll be something like this. Reeves, D, 2016, Building Materials Manual is italicised, followed by a comma. It was published by the Australian College of Environmental Studies, comma, and it was done in Melbourne. So all of your manuals at the college will look something like that. Another example, Bausma, N, 2018, Advanced Feng Shui Manual, 4th edition, published by the Australian College of Environmental Studies in Melbourne again. So remember, where the dots and the commas go is really important. If you're referencing a CD or DVD, you follow the surname by the initial, the year, the title of the CD is italicised, and then the medium, you have to stipulate CD, ROM, edition if applicable, publisher and place of publication. So in this example, Rose and M was the author in 1998, comma, and then the title of the CD was Marx Carl, 1818 to 1883. And then in Routledge Encyclopedia of Philosophy, so this is the title, very long title, and then this is the medium that was used to say that it was a CD-ROM. Then the edition, 2nd edition, if there is more than one edition, then you have to state it. If not, then that's excluded. And then, of course, the publisher is Routledge, and it was published in New York. So you find they're very similar, online, CD, etc. But it's important to start getting your head around it, and that's what your manual is for, and that's what this workshop has been designed to do, to show you how to do this. This will get easier as you do referencing over time. When you're referencing a pamphlet, you include the year, author, comma, year, title of article in italicised, then pamphlet, the medium, the edition, if it's not the first, followed by the publisher and place of publication. For example, Centrelink, 2018, bonus for working seniors in italicised, pamphlet in brackets, Department of Human Services, Brisbane. Or another example, Yarra Valley Water, ND for no date, 20 Ways to Save Water, italicised because that's the title of the pamphlet, and then pamphlets written to say it was a pamphlet, followed by the publisher, which was Yarra Valley Water, and where it was published, which was Victoria. Magazines include the author, year, title of article, magazine name, date of publication, page number. For example, McVeigh, T, 2011, Death Wish, which is the title of the magazine, of the article. The Australian magazine is not italicised, followed by the exact date of publication and page number. Government publications include the surname, initial or group, year of publication, title of publication italicised, the status of the report, publisher and place of publication. And here are 2 examples. Australian Bureau of Statistics, 1994, and then italicised is the title of the publication, which was Australia's Food and Nutrition. And then the status of the report was a catalogue number 8904.0, and the person who published this was the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, in Canberra. And I have another example there that you can read in your own time. Government publications are usually written by a department, a commission of inquiry, a committee or a bureau. With regards to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, always include the ABS catalogue number in the reference. This is usually found on the title page. Government reports must include the author or name of the group responsible for the report. Conference papers, you include the following: surname, comma, initial, year of publication, the title of the paper is quoted, and then the full title of the conference is italicised. The editor of proceedings, if applicable, the place of the conference, comma, the date it took place, the publisher, the place of publications, and page numbers. And here is an example, it's a very long example, of a reference list from a conference paper. So if you're reading a conference paper and you wanted to cite some useful information from that, you'd include the name and date in the essay, but the reference list would look something like this, so that your tutor or myself would be able to go to this and actually confirm that you actually got the information from there. For example, Claire J. at Hawes, C. 1999, in italics, Breaking Down the Barriers for Women, Empowering Nurses to Take Part in Research Culture. And the name of the conference was Winds of Change, Women and the Culture of the Universities, followed by all the other information. Just to recap, that's the Harvard system. It takes a little bit of a while to get your head around referencing, but it is one of the most important skills that you require as a person of critical thinking and as a researcher, and particularly as a building biologist. You need to know where the information came from in order to give you credibility in the work that you do. So just to recap, the Harvard system is the name and date. You only include the name and the date in the body of the work, and at the back of the report or assessment, you'll have a reference list in alphabetical order of all the references you used in the body of the work. If you need more information about the Harvard system, here are some good websites which will explain about how to use the Harvard system, from Queensland University, Flinders University of South Australia, O'Connor's work citing or referencing electronic sources of information, Peters, there's an old textbook, or you can ring us at the college. If you've never referenced before, especially for feng shui students doing the healthy home subject, we'd strongly suggest that in the first assessment that you do, write up one page where you reference the information, including the reference list, and submit it to your trainer or submit it to me at the college, and I'll have a look to check that you're doing it correctly, because we're here to help you. It takes a little bit of time to get your head around referencing, but in the end, it will be one of the most important skills that you ever acquire as a researcher in order to justify and provide credibility to the work that you do. Thank you.